So we're officially hitting the midpoint of the year, but also the halfway point of your winter sports season. So one thing that you might see that is coming up more often is soft tissue injuries, in particular hamstring strains. Lots of footballers, lots of rugby league, rugby union, AFL players get plagued by this epidemic of hamstring strains. So I'm going to talk a little bit about hamstring rehab and what it needs to look like to make sure that you can get back onto the pitch. I think the first big thing with hamstring strains is that different locations and different degrees of tear obviously indicate different levels of severity, but also may change how you acutely manage these hamstring strains. So I think having a clinician that understands that and doesn't give you just a cookie cutter approach to how to rehab a hamstring is really important. And they can also explain where may be a more high risk area or where may be an area that you can push through a bit more pain and a bit more loading is very important. Some of the main considerations that as a patient you should be thinking about with your hamstring rehab is, firstly, are you loading your hamstring enough? There are extremely high forces that go through the hamstring when you're sprinting. So if your rehab looks too simplistic or doesn't have any real heavy load or heavy challenge to the hamstring, then it's probably underloading yourself and you might be risking re-injuring yourself when you hit the pitch again. The second thing that is really important is having some element of working at speed in your rehab. These are things like hamstring switches or hamstring catches, things like that. You want to make sure that you're exposing your hamstring to speed as it lengthens to replicate the demands of sprinting before you go out there and have a run. So the end stage of your rehab in the gym should really be resembling this with things like hamstring catches, hamstring switches, and working at lots of speed with that hamstring. The last thing is that I think that it's very important to have a structured battery to determine whether you can return to running or whether you can return to sport. Ensuring that your clinician can explain to you the different tests that you have to tick off or the different tests that determine whether you're ready for running, whether that's using our technology in the clinic, such as the force frame or the pullet to be able to quantify your hamstring strength, but also using endurance markers, making sure that your length is equal and making sure that you have no tenderness on palpation are all little tests that are important to make sure that you don't get re-injured when you go back. So if you're looking for a tailored hamstring rehab program that looks like all of these things that I've said, then give us a ring and we'll sort you out.